It's my great honor to open this conference of the Internationale Rosenzweig Gesellschaft, Back to Redemption, Rosenzweig Star 1919 to 2019. My name is Benjamin Pollock, and I'm the director of the Franz Rosenzweig Minerva Research Center at the Hebrew University, and co-organizer together with Yunon Vigoda of this conference. And it's really just a treat to see all of your faces after all of the weeks and months of working on the conference on paper. On the 16th of February, 1919, Rosenzweig wrote the last words of the Stern der Erlösung. But in this moment when Rosenzweig expected to feel a sense of closure that was befitting such a remarkable achievement, he writes to Margaret Rosenstock-Huessy in disappointment. I quote, "It's already 12. I've read all of Hamlet, and 2 letters arrived from you for dessert. And I finished writing The Gate, Tor. I always thought completing the star would be worthy of a telegram to you, an euch, to Gritli and Eugen. But as things turned out, I had no desire at all to send one. It wasn't good enough. I did then improve it in all kinds of ways, and tomorrow morning we'll do so further. But the redemptive mood of closure is missing. Aber die richtige erlöste Fertigstimmung ist nicht da." The next day, the 17th of February 1919, exactly 100 years ago today, Rosenzweig has a more positive impression of the book's ending. He writes, quote, "Es ist ja doch einfach schön." It is indeed simply fine or beautiful. I just read it through again, end quote. And yet the perplexity he felt over his ambivalent feelings about finishing the star continued to trouble him. The very next day, the 18th of February, he offers an explanation for his ambivalence regarding the ending of the book. In another letter to Rosenstock-Huessy, he again expresses his puzzlement, quote, "Contrary to my expectation, this completion doesn't leave any impression on me," end quote, but he immediately suggests a musical image by way of explanation. The book's conclusion, he writes, is, quote, "a Halbschluss," a half cadence, as if you ended on the 3rd above the root note, this open ending, offene Ende. The fact that I completed it wasn't the least bit important as an endpoint, and as a starting point, it is nothing but word, end quote. So why didn't Rosenzweig experience a redemptive feeling of closure upon completing the star? According to his letter, the ending of the Stern der Erlösung is a half cadence, the completion of a musical segment that doesn't return to the root note of the key of the piece, but remains suspended in the air at the 5th interval or the 3rd note of the triadic chord above the root note. This kind of ending invites a musical complement on the basis of the recollection of the key of the piece in another musical segment. And for this reason, it is an open ending, as Rosenzweig describes it. As readers of the star well know, the conclusion of the Stern der Erlösung is indeed an open ending. It invites the reader to complete in life the redemptive course described in the book. And the star's conclusion has invited myriad completions in philosophical and theological thinking ever since. Its ending is still open. At this distance of 100 years, we, the international community of scholars of Rosenzweig's thought, have the opportunity over the next few days to respond to this open ending, to complement it, by exploring, rethinking, and grappling with the culminating concept of the star, Erlösung. We've invited you all to come back to redemption, back to the meaning and the implication of the concept of redemption in the star, back to the historical moment in which Rosenzweig's call to act towards redemption was indeed a call into the future, to a moment when redemption was a spiritual, a political, and an intellectual aspiration, and back to Rosenzweig's particular concept of redemption to examine how it has contributed to religious, political, and cultural discourse surrounding redemption that continues to impact the contemporary world in manifold ways. What can Rosenzweig's star teach us as we reflect on the meaning of redemption from this distance now of 100 years? Is redemption and Rosenzweig's account of it still a living issue today, theologically, politically, religiously, philosophically, culturally? These are questions that we hope will hover in the background and will sometimes come to the fore of our scholarly discussions over the next few days. We're thrilled to host you all, and we thank you for coming from near and from very far to the conference. It's truly an international gathering. For much of the conference, as those of you who have perused the program know, there will run parallel sessions that are divided generally according to interpretive, historical, and discursive aspects of Rosenzweig's concept of redemption and its impact. And then starting this evening, we have a series of 3 evening panels where our hope is to open up the scholarly reflections on redemption in broad, compelling, and publicly relevant ways through responses to questions inspired by Rosenzweig, but that we hope will extend beyond Rosenzweig scholarship proper. Is the world redeemable? Is the human being redeemable? Is God redeemable? And along the way, we have a number of meetings of the Internationale Rosenzweig Gesellschaft, a number of events and cultural activities, including a musical performance this evening. This conference has, of course, been a serious undertaking, and I want to offer my thanks now to those without whom we just would not be here today. And first of all, I would like to extend my thanks to Professor Christian Wiese, who has supported the conference, first of all, through the Martin Buber Professor für jüdische Religionsphilosophie at the Goethe-Universität, and through his Lohe project, Religiose Positionierung. But he has also raised extensive and vital funding for the conference in other ways that I will get back to in a moment. I want to offer my thanks to the Minerva Stiftung, which has given us a grant allowing us to incorporate a Minerva school into the conference. The Minerva School offers funds for programs that invest in junior scholars in particular, and it's enabled us to offer significant funding for young scholars who don't have their own research accounts, and to run special sessions offering junior scholars the opportunity to receive professional and scholarly advice from senior scholars. And we hope that this grant will help continue to make the Internationale Rosenzweig Gesellschaft a society that supports the younger generation of Rosenzweig scholars. I want to offer my thanks to a number of other foundations and institutions for funding: the Axel Springer Stiftung, the Alfons und Gertrud Kassel Stiftung, die Vereinigung von Freunden und Förderern der Goethe-Universität, the Berman Center for Philosophical Studies at the Hebrew University, die Stiftung zur Förderung der internationalen wissenschaftlichen Beziehungen der Goethe-Universität, die Evangelische Kirche in Hessen und Nassau, die Hannah und Joshua Bubis Stiftung, the Hebrew University here in Jerusalem, and the Franz Rosenzweig Minerva Research Center. The staff of the Rosenzweig Center has planned the entirety of the conference that we are about to embark on, and I want to offer a special thanks to the staff of the center, especially to Shaked Meromi, to Dana Rubenstein, to Shir Tversky, and to Sarah Yonovsky, and most especially to Mor Hajbi, who has managed absolutely every detail of the conference, has been in touch with you, and I hope that over the course of the conference, you'll have the chance also to thank her and thank the entire staff in person. And I want to thank next my partner in organizing this conference, Dr. Yunon Vigoda, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Martin Buber Society of Fellows at the Hebrew University. We've tried to call this conference a Buber-Rosenzweig collaboration, but that sounded to us a little bit presumptuous. But it has been just a pleasure to work with Yunon in planning this event. And last in my series of thank yous, I want to offer a thank you to our host for the next few days, and that is the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute. And it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Shai Lavi, Professor of Law at Tel Aviv University and the Director of the Van Leer Institute, to offer some words of greeting.
Good afternoon. It's an honor and a pleasure to host this conference, the Franz Rosenzweig International Conference. I was asked to greet you, which I do, and to do so shortly. And it's a good thing too, as the time constraints will not allow me to say anything of import on Rosenzweig. A highly prudent move when one speaks to a room full of experts on Rosenzweig. Rather, I will briefly address some of the more straightforward questions that the conference poses. Is the world redeemable? Is man redeemable? Is there redemption for God? Clearly, this conference aims high, but since there is no other worthy direction to aim at, I would like to congratulate Benjamin and Inon for opening up the discussion of Rosenzweig in this particular way, which I am confident will prove productive. As it turns out, and after further reflection, these questions, though not formulated in the language of redemption, compose also the heart of the research themes of this institute. So today, we, that would be inhabitants of the 21st century, seem to stand as far removed as ever from the idea and the ideal of redemption. In the age of climate change and global warming, for example, the world, that is the world of nature, appears to many experts and activists beyond redemption. In the age of global markets and labor migration, our polities have fallen under the sway of forces arguably beyond their control. Trying to bring them under our control leads to arguable atrocities such as the declaration of state of emergency, which brings us closer to perhaps to the abyss than, as the poets would put it, than to redemption. Finally, in our secular age, even if we were to think of ourselves as worthy of redemption, it is unclear who will redeem us, as the gods seem to have fled the earth. Talk about post-secular societies notwithstanding. I mentioned the age of the Anthropocene, globalization and secularization or secularism, because they correspond to the questions of the redemption of the world, humanity, and God, but also because these are the three core themes currently studied at this institute. But perhaps because redemption lies furthest away from us, surely for us academics for whom participating in a conference on redemption might be as closest as we get to redemption, we may be able to have a glimpse at redemption. Here, I leave you with great expectation of the coming 3 days, as well as with a quote from Friedrich Hölderlin's Menemosyne. The heavenly powers cannot do all things. It is the mortals who reach sooner into the abyss. So the turn, the echo, is with these. Long is the time, but the true comes into its own. Lang ist die Zeit. Es ereignet sich aber das Wahre. Thank you.
It's left for me now to offer a few very special acknowledgments and then a special introduction. First, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Rosenzweig family here at the conference. We have, if my numbers are right, 4 out of 5 of Franz Rosenzweig's grandchildren here with us this evening for the conference. Joel Rosenzweig, Dita Liron Rosenzweig, Ronit Shai, Micha Rosenzweig, and I understand that Manuel Franz Rosenzweig is not here with us. We welcome you, we're honored by your presence, and we hope that the conference will convey to you how important and how unique your grandfather's contribution to modern Jewish thought is. Secondly, I would like to further acknowledge the former presidents of the Internationale Rosenzweig Gesellschaft. Unfortunately, Professor Wolf-Dietrich Schmid-Kowarczyk could not attend. It's my understanding that he may be watching us, though, through a live stream that we set up for the occasion, and we very much hope he is watching and is with us virtually in that way. I want to acknowledge Professor Miriam Bienenstock. Is she here? I acknowledge her into the future, waiting for her arrival, and want to acknowledge the presence of Professor Robert Gibbs. We thank you for your service to the society and for what you've done for Rosenzweig scholarship. I have a final honor for the afternoon, and that is to introduce Professor Ephraim Meir. Professor Meir is Professor Emeritus of Modern Jewish Philosophy at Bar-Ilan University. Between 2009 and 2017, he also served as the Levinas Guest Professor for Jewish Dialogue Studies and Interreligious Theology at the Academy of World Religions at the University of Hamburg. He is a prolific author of scholarship, and his recent works include Letters of Love, Rosenzweig's Spiritual Biography and Oeuvre in Light of the Gritli Letters from 2007, Levinas's Jewish Thought Between Jerusalem and Athens, 2008, Identity Dialogically Constructed, 2011, Differenz und Dialog from 2011 as well, Between Heschel and Buber, a comparative study, together with Alexander Even-Chen from 2012, Dialogical Thought and Identity from 2013, Interreligious Theology, Its Value and Mooring in Modern Jewish Philosophy from 2015, Becoming Interreligious from 2017, and his latest monograph from last year, 2018, Old New Jewish Humanism. I'm proud and honored to be able to introduce to you the president of the Internationale Rosenzweig Gesellschaft, Professor Ephraim Meir, who will offer his presidential address, Redeeming Religions. Bye.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Dear colleagues, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the International Rosenzweig Conference here in Jerusalem, a centenary after the completion of the Star. Redemption is the theme of this conference, carefully organized by Benjamin Pollock, Yinon Vigoda and their team. And at the Rome Conference of 2017, Rosenzweig was hailed as a pioneer in dialogical thinking, a hero of the Ende. This is true. But uneasy questions remain. First of all, can we redeem the non-Jewish and non-Christian religions in the star and give them a place in the process of redemption? Second, are religions able to redeem the world? Third, can religions be redeemed from their own, perhaps original sin? My lecture is therefore about liberating religions from negative treatment, about restoring their soteriological function, and about freeing them from exclusivist tendencies. I start with the first point. Rosenzweig grew up in a dominantly Christian world. Over the course of time, he came to perceive Jewish existence as an unusual phenomenon, highly critical of the dominant society. He rescued Judaism from its marginality and placed it at its center, contending that Christian vitality depended upon its living Jewish source. In the world Rosenzweig inhabited before he shaped his own worldview, Judaism hardly had a place. On his spiritual journey, he gradually distanced himself from a culture that marginalized Judaism. With his new worldview, unusual in his time, he created a still problematic, but nevertheless new dual we. My first question concerns Rosenzweig's limited Jewish-Christian horizon. Can we come to a new alternative gestalt, to a broader we? Rosenzweig was shaped by a Christian world and freed himself from its a prioris. However, while shaping his own worldview, he created new oppositional thinking. Judaism was no longer a regrettable phenomenon deviating from the dominant culture. It became the critical element in a world that refused otherness. It was redemptive, even for Christians. Yet, non-Jewish and non-Christian religions remained out of his spiritual horizon. With all his innovations, Rosenzweig nonetheless inherited the West European narrative on religions. As a new Yehuda Levi, he saved Judaism, but concomitantly neglected other religious ways of life. Other religions did not merit a place in the process of redemption. Fortunately, in his Lessing lectures of 1919, he corrected himself. He now agreed with Lessing that Jews and Christians were first of all human beings. In the post-Star period, he broadened his perspective, leaving more space for the religious other. The Star shows, as is well known, a progression from the religions of China, India, and Greece in part 1, to Islam in part 2, and to Christianity and Judaism in part 3. The religions in part 1 understand the elements, but insufficiently. Islam in part 2 grasps the course, but equally insufficiently. Finally, Christianity and Judaism in part 3 grasp the configuration of the elements and the course, each seeing a part of the whole configuration. In the rigorously planned framework of his discussion on creation, which becomes manifest in Revelation, Rosenzweig writes about the religions of China, India, and Greece. He hereby grants a special place to paganism. Yet, he was conscious that his most serious deficiencies in the Star concerned China and all the more India. A similar deficiency characterizes his description of Islam. To Gertrude Oppenheim, he admitted that the treatment of Islam in the Star was his biggest flaw. In the system of the Star, Islam functions in an antithetic position, as a legalistic formation. It serves as an example of a complete misunderstanding of what a relation with its commandment of love entails. It presents the pagan notions of God, man, and the world in revelation without an inward turn. In the Star, Rosenzweig does not offer a matter-of-fact objective description of the religions of India, China, and Greece. They rather provide him with an opportunity to approach God, world, and man as separate substances on the level of creation. Similarly, Islam plays a unique function in the Star. It's an example of how not to perceive revelation. It's therefore, like the religions of the Far East, a thought category, not a description of real existing Islam. It is typologically contrasted to the true faith, wahre Glauben. Following Rosenzweig's logic, one may ask how much Islam is present in Judaism and Christianity, or how much Judeo-Christian tradition is present in Islam, or in the religions of antiquity. But the fact that Islam overall is characterized in a negative way, as not understanding what true revelation is about, removes us from what Islam is in the real world. In defense of Rosenzweig, one could argue that this description of the religions in the Star is a purely philosophical account of them. Yet, such a defense of the system, as justified as it may be in itself, at the same time inculpates the one who questions the system as not being systematic. With this inculpation, with this indictment, one accuses the one who criticizes Rosenzweig's view of world religions of lacking philosophical rigor. This is a way of excluding, in which the reading of the Star is reserved for philosophical feinschmeckers. Hence again my question: can the non-Jewish and non-Christian religions be rescued from their inferior status in the Star? Can they belong to redemption and be included in it? Belonging to a well-defined group is consistent with belonging to the world as such, which has to be mended and in which a variety of religions serve as guides or roadmaps for various nations and cultures. By transposing the Hegelian thought on Judaism to Islam, Rosenzweig establishes a new power structure. The question is how not to talk about other religions, how to get rid of a predisposition that excels the own by lowering the other. On this point, the apophantic tradition comes to our rescue. In a negative theology, the infinite is unutterable. All religions have much to say about what remains finally ineffable. They are a mosaic of different experiences of the transcendent. If one accepts that transcendent is beyond all religions and experienced in a variety of ways, religions may be redeemed. Religions that are not Jewish and not Christian rather disappear in Rosenzweig's process of redemption because they do not fit the concept of redemption. Yet, are the various world religions not all varying experience of transcendence, which as ultimate reality remains indescribable? Does redemption not surmise a dialogue between religions? Could redemption be conceived as an interreligious dialogue in which one learns from the other, translates in an act of peace, and communicates in a trans-different attitude? In such a perspective, redemption is essentially the dialogue between different people who want to create an always expanding new we, much as envisioned in Psalm 115. Religions differ greatly, But in order to create a society in which plurality is celebrated, there must be communication between them. Since we live in one world, such a communication is not only desirable, it is necessary. In a transdifferent perspective, talking about true faith, as this Rosenzweig, is replaced with a plurality of narratives that all concern the ultimate reality approached from multiple perspectives. In his essay Apologetisches Denken, Rosenzweig warned his readership not to idealize the own and only superficially take notice of the other. He was well aware of the problem of self-glorification to the detriment of the other. Yet, such a glorification on the negative background of the other is there in his description of Islam. Collective identities are frequently shaped on the negative background of other identities. To my mind, a new we comes into being only with respect for a plurality of dissimilar religions, which are all valid human organizations reacting to a transcendent reality. I use the term transdifference in order to mark the differences between religions and at the same time their essential relatedness. Transdifference avoids the scala of particularities that are cut off from the larger world and the charybdis of an illusionary unity that does away with distinctiveness. In transdifferent religiosity, one may discover what makes people specific and what unites them. In light of the creation of a transdifferent religiosity and society, one cannot take Rosenzweig's descriptions of Islam and of the ancient religions of China, India, and Greece at face value. These religions function perfectly well in his philosophical system, but this system does not do justice to the religions as they are in reality. Rosenzweig inevitably deforming Eurocentrism could be corrected by bringing Rosenzweig against himself, just as he himself was anti-Hegelian with the help of Hegel. Reimagining the star, we might pluralize the religious field, allowing the copula end to stand between more religions than merely Judaism and Christianity. In a highly structured system, Rosenzweig offers his readers a certain picture of revelation that is diametrically opposed to all that Islam stands for. The problem is that he works with the concept of the way of Allah. As a consequence of using mere concepts, his talk about the true faith somehow joins exclusive truth claims. Alternatively, one may point to the presence of relatedness in many other religions. Relatedness as a sign of love occurs in a variety of religious lifestyles, including Buddhism, Jainism, Baha'i, Confucianism, Hinduism, Taoism, and Islam. Rosenzweig's classification of religions neglects the relationality present in the vast majority of religions. The divine commandment of love is central in Rosenzweig's star, but it is unclear why he excludes religious others from hearing or understanding the high demand of love. Although his diatribe against Hegel saves Judaism, Rosenzweig perpetuates existing negative images of religious others, bringing creatures, or caricatures better, that perpetuate deep-seated prejudices. In the star, the dual divine commandment of love receives a twofold answer in Jewish and Christian communities. But why should the answer to a call for love be restricted to only two groups? The dimension of love is present in a majority of religions. If God's love is encompassing and universal, how is it possible not to include a variety of religious others? On the level of redemption, when we critically ask if mending the world, the tikkun olam, by loving the neighbor, is the exclusive task of Jews and Christians. And yet, Rosenzweig is at the beginning of the redemption of religions themselves, since he advances more than one religion as providing legitimate answers to what remains transcendent. He also knows that the different houses of God are not God's bride. This is the start for a pluralization of theology, in which one's own orientation to the transcendent is only one vantage point in a wide range of orientations. A pluralist and transdifferent perspective developed in a dialogical theology that has dialogue as its aim and method, respects the uniqueness of each and every religion, and is open to mutual exchange, fecundation, and even transformation. Dialogical theology tries to understand the other as she wants to be understood. It seems to me that it is preferable to conceive of revelation as revelation of the transcendent, to which different religions offer diverse responses, in which nevertheless collectively love and empathy play a significant role. The Druze faith, the Alevite faith, Baha'i, Islam, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, Jainism, and other religions are all reactions to what John Hick calls the ultimate. Can we redeem them from a second-rank position in a religious pyramid, the top of which is occupied by Judaism and Christianity? Rosenzweig created a double covenant theology that courageously put Christianity alongside Judaism. The experiences of religious others are played down and not recognized as legitimate and valid encounters with the transcendent. Are other religions precursors, mere precursors of the truth of Judaism and Christianity? Why should these two religions be spearheads on the front line of all other religions? Rosenzweig's apologetic mood is understandable. He had to defend himself against a pervasive, totalizing vision that negated the Jewish particularity. During history, Christians held the view that redemption came into the world only and exclusively with Jesus, causing much sufferance to the Jews. Rosenzweig showed the relevance, actuality, necessity of a deviance from a dominantly Christian world. He shaped his own identity in permanent conversation with his Christian friends who denied his Jewish specificity. But his appreciation of a dual response to revelation prevented him from recognizing the broader spectrum of religions that all constitute partial responses to the transcendent. Today, we recognize the rich and complex tapestry of religions. There is also more interchange between religious persons and a new understanding of interreligious communion. All religions have love potential and are attempts to welcome transcendence. It is also increasingly recognized that for different diseases, one needs different medications, and correspondingly, different religious paths are necessary for different groups. In a pluralist, interreligious theology, the interaction with other religions is necessary in order to appreciate the diverse experiences of transcendence and to learn from them. We are not alone in our experiential access to transcendence. Through intensive listening to what others have to say about transcendence, we may learn and enrich our spiritual lives. This presupposes epistemological humility. Our own interpretation of the divine is not the only one. The plurality of interpretations offers a more complete view on the ultimate. All religions have their own language game, but there is the possibility of communicating and understanding each other. In Rosenzweig's phrasing, there is only one language. Es gibt nur eine Sprache. In a trans-different society, differences are highlighted, and thanks to these differences, communication becomes possible. Religious orders are partners in bringing redemption. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that with the preceding, that I have made clear that religions have to be redeemed from their second-class status in the star. My second brief point is that they also have to be redeemed, that is, religions have to be redeemed from Weltfremdheit. A practical, world-oriented soteriology pays attention to human suffering and finds ways to alleviate it. It encourages religions to play an active role in the public sphere. A world-oriented soteriology emphasizes that before praying for help from above, Yekun Purkan Min Shemaya, one has to work Ba'al Mahadin, to bring deliverance from beneath. Such a soteriology stimulates religions to contribute to the improvement of society in a this-worldly spirituality. After all, it's the world that has to be redeemed and mended in the process of redemption. As Rosenzweig noted, God did not create religion. He created the world. Gott hat eben nicht die Religion, sondern die Welt geschaffen. Rosenzweig was interested in truth. Paganism was the truth in embryonic form. In part 3, Judaism is the truth, above Maimonides and Mendelssohn's equation of Judaism and philosophy. If this were not the case, Rosenzweig maintains, Jews would not have any interest in reading the star. Happily, we read at the end of the star that the task to do justice, to live loving kindness, and to walk humbly with your God is everyone's task. Redemption is necessarily world-oriented. In this way, Rosenzweig resembles Nathan the Wise, who wanted those who feel near to God to work for a nobler humanity. Like Lessing, Rosenzweig conceived of the truth as to be done, to be realized. This insight is useful in the construction of a dialogical theology in which truth is never abstract, eternal, and ahistorical, but to be done in life. Religions may be redeemed by concrete action into the world, by verily mending the world. Their common action to heal a broken world is their redemption. I come now to the third and last brief point. I asked if religions are able to redeem the world. If one succeeds in redeeming religions from their hierarchical ranking in the star, one has not yet redeemed the world. But it's a start. Religions cannot redeem the world if they continue to have absolute truth claims, from which they exclude others. The truth is necessarily subjectively experienced and lived. It is always truth for somebody. It follows that religions themselves have to be redeemed from their centuries-long sin of thinking that they possess the truth. This is my third and last point. In the name of religions, many injustices have been inflicted, delaying redemption. Absolute truth claims led in the past to persecution, annihilation. Religions are pharmakon, poison, and yet medicine. Again, Rosenzweig's thoughts about God as the truth in which religions participate is most helpful in reimagining the redemption of the world by redeeming religions themselves. But why should only Judaism and Christianity participate in the truth which finally transcends all religions? Rosenzweig himself knew that confusing religion with God himself is counter-redemptive. Reconceiving religions as testifying to the transcendent is liberating. Religious texts that reflect human responses to the divine easily become absolutized. For this reason, Moses had to smash the first tablets that contained the Ten Commandments. Texts are not God himself. The source of texts is not reducible to a text. If the text replaces the source, it's cut off from the living source and absolutized, then there is no longer any respect for the source, which is unutterable and infinite. To my mind, all religious texts are finite recipients of the divine, which is not itself containable within the finite. What comes into expression cannot exhaust what is not graspable in words or formula. One has to remain conscious that the infinite cannot be confined into the finite, although the finite hints at the infinite. In the words of Peter Berger, there is a rumor of angels. Once again, the apophantic tradition comes to rescue religions from their sins. Negative theology prevents one from projecting one's own attributes into the divine. God's name is not to be pronounced. He is transcendent, beyond, and therefore all God talk is problematic. In the Jewish tradition, which loves to discover the spiritual in the materiality of words and in corporeality, the world, olam, conveys the hidden, ne'elam. This means that the divine is not completely disclosed and entirely uncovered, but rather suggested. The transcendent comes into expression in the world, but it can never be fully present, open, and available. Only fanatics completely know God. The apophantic tradition thus teaches us that the beyond is not graspable. In many ways, transcendence is manipulated and misused for social and political reasons. But the beyond reveals itself only as a still, small voice called the Mamadaka, almost unheard. The infinite is alluded at. Apophantic theology makes religions humble before God's face and prevents religious totalitarianism. I come to the conclusion. Here in Israel, especially here in Jerusalem, religious sensibility lies in the positive interaction between people who belong to different cultures and religions. We all are partners in the improvement of political, social, and economic conditions. Truth comes into being in dialogue. It sprouts from the earth, emet mi'eretz titzmach, from beneath, in dialogue. Phrased differently, a dialogical theology is linked to secularity and nurtures itself with social, economic, and political action on the ground. Rosenzweig's idea of eternity, realized within our worldly life, may inspire us in the construction of an interreligious discourse on redemption. How do Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, or Taoism contribute to an interreligious theology that liberates human beings from suffering and strives for a more equal and peaceful society? Rosenzweig's narrative on the double covenant breaches the monopoly of one religion. But it does not stand up to scrutiny when one takes into account the plurality of religions which are all organizations around a transcendent reality to be approached in human solidarity. The inclusive alternative of interreligious cooperation replaces a narrative on the axis of evil and the clash of civilization. Our times are in need of a non-exclusivist, humanist, non-naive view of religions. Finally, Rosenzweig's view on redemption cannot be properly understood without his view on messianism. Rosenzweig fled apocalyptic messianism that envisions a catastrophic end followed by a miraculous and utopian era. Neither was his messianism political. It was rather anticipated in communities that lived eternity and hoped for it in their liturgies. In the kingdom, eternity takes place as a today that would be conscious of being more than today. Ewigkeit ist ein Heute, das aber sich bewusst ist, mehr als heute zu sein. Kingdom and eternity belong together. This eternity is understood by Rosenzweig as the future, which is already here, a tomorrow, which may be today. Dissimilar to Hegel, he deems that eternity is never realized in states, which strive for a false eternity. He protests against the theodicy of history and pleads for a community that lives eternity in a meta-historical time, critical of history, free from its chains. In 1948, the Jewish people entered again into history after 2,000 years. Again, we have a state. And this is a great event. However, Rosenzweig resists Jewish normalization in the land as in the diaspora. Can we still hear his words in Jerusalem today? If the star would be translated into Hebrew, Rosenzweig wanted as its title not Kochav HaGeula, but Kochav MiYaakov, alluding to Bileam's prophecy, the star shall shoot forth from Jacob, Darach Kochav MiYaakov. In his disclosure of redemption, eternity needs to be realized both in Zion and in the diaspora. In all places, Jews must preserve their meta-historical destiny. On a wall at Ben Gurion Airport, one can read that Herzl called Zionism an infinite ideal. To Rosenzweig's mind, the infinity of that ideal prevents the absolutization of any finite realization. The verse in the Amidah prayer, may our eyes behold your return to Zion in mercy, wat gezien in uw bezoek gaat Zion, Berachamim, implies communities that hope for and anticipate redemption, in which the whole earth is full of his glory. I wonder what Rosenzweig would have thought about the expression Ad Galta de Geula, the dawn of redemption, or Eshitz Michat Geulatenu, the first flowering of our redemption. Whatever his answer would have been, redemption had to be realized by human beings in Tikkun Olam. This is the eminently Jewish element in the star. Those who participate in the divine truth have to make the truth true in the plurality of communities. Conceiving of truth as truth for us, communities remain distinct. Continuing and broadening Rosenzweig's thoughts on messianism, one may perceive the brilliance of messianic light in each and every human being. Redemption is therefore not a more or less catastrophic end of history by the coming of a Messiah. It is rather the process of unifying the sparks in the soul of all with their divine source. By bringing the kingdom, a plurality of communities testify to the fact that truth is always lived in a partial, fragmental way, and it has to be made true in the praxis of bringing worldly redemption. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, may this conference, Back to Redemption, contribute to a critical re-evaluation of Rosenzweig's thoughts for today. I wish all the participants in this Rosenzweig Congress good encounters, fruitful discussions, and a memorable stay in Jerusalem.
Thank you so much, Professor Meir, for this inspiring and provocative opening to our conference. We'll now take